Let me tell you, nobody expects their life to change before breakfast, especially not a guy like Edward Harrison, the kind of man who moves through the city behind tinted glass, never touching the mess of the world outside. But that one morning, rain hammering the streets, thunder rolling like some kind of cosmic joke, he did something out of character. He stepped out of his chauffeured comfort and just walked. No plan, no umbrella, nothing but the sudden urge to feel something real for once. The rain came down with a vengeance, plastering his expensive haircut to his skull, soaking through layers that were supposed to keep the world at bay. And he thought, fine, let it rain. Let it remind me I'm still here, still breakable, still one misstep from being just another guy caught in a storm. He ducked under an awning, heart pounding not from the weather, but from the shock of realizing just how empty he'd let his life become. All routine and numbers and meetings and nobody to talk to. At the end of the day, that's when he heard it. A faint shuffle, hesitant, almost apologetic. He glanced down, expecting to see maybe a commuter or a dog. But no, it was a little girl, raincoat 2 sizes too big, brown curls stuck to her forehead, blue eyes big as hope itself, holding a red umbrella that had clearly seen better days. She just stood there, silent at first, staring up at this soaked, awkward stranger. And then, with a seriousness that broke right through all his defenses, she held the umbrella out to him. "Take it," she said, her voice so soft he had to lean down to hear. "Mama doesn't need it anymore." You ever have a kid say something so honest, so raw, it makes you feel like you've been punched right in the gut? That's what it was like. He wanted to ask where her mom was, what she was doing out here, but the words just stuck. He finally took the umbrella, his hand shaking more than he cared to admit, and she let go like she was giving away her last piece of safety. That's when he noticed how thin she was, how dark the circles were under her eyes. Not just a kid lost for an hour, but a kid who'd been on her own a while. "Why doesn't your mama need it?" he asked, careful not to sound like he was prying. She looked up, lips quivering, but there was no fear, just truth. "Because she died," she said. "She got sick and didn't wake up. And man, if you think you're tough, try standing in the rain with a 5-year-old who's already lost everything." That he asked her name, desperate to keep her talking, give her anything to hold on to. "Emma," she whispered, and it felt like something sacred, like maybe it would keep her real if he said it out loud. He shrugged out of his soaked coat and wrapped it around her, saw how she clung to it, eyes still searching his face for some sign he'd vanished too. He knew right then he couldn't just leave her, couldn't call social services and walk away. He told her, "I'm going to take you somewhere safe," and she nodded, barely, but it was enough. He scooped her up, she weighed almost nothing, and carried her into the nearest cafe, hoping nobody would ask questions he couldn't answer. Inside, the barista took one look at them and, God bless her, just pointed them to a booth, brought over a towel and hot chocolate without saying a word. Emma sat there, hands around the paper cup, sipping like she was trying not to waste a single drop. He tried to make small talk, but all she did was shake her head when he asked if she had anyone at all. "No one," she said, and he felt the weight of that like it was his own. He knew he had to do something. But the idea of dropping her into some system made him sick. He remembered being a kid, standing in a hospital hallway while a nurse told him his own mom was gone, how nobody had offered to stay. He promised himself he wouldn't do that to Emma. He asked, careful, "Do you know where your dad is?" Her answer, "He doesn't want me. He only came back when Mama got sick. Said if she gave him money, he'd sign the papers to say I wasn't his anymore." Nearly broke him. Oh, he did the only thing he could think of. He called his old friend Henry, a lawyer with a heart and a backbone, explained everything. Henry told him straight, "You're making a commitment that'll last the rest of your life." And Edward, who'd never hesitated in a boardroom, didn't hesitate now. "I can't walk away from her." They got the emergency guardianship started. He told Emma she could come home with him, and for the first time, her eyes lit up. Not much, but enough to show hope was still in there somewhere at Tia's house. Everything felt too big, too clean. He showed her the guest room, tried to make it feel like hers, pointed out the little lamp shaped like a moon. "This is for me?" she asked, and when he said yes, He meant it more than anything he'd ever said in his life. That night, he barely slept, haunted by her words. Mama doesn't need it anymore. Wondering if he could ever be enough for a kid who'd lost so much. Morning came. Henry arrived with paperwork, and Emma watched it all with the wariness of someone used to having things taken away. When Henry explained she wouldn't have to go anywhere unless she wanted, she nodded, the tiniest start of trust showing through. After Henry left, Edward asked if she wanted to see the garden. Outside, the world was washed clean by rain. Emma crouched by a rose bush, touching a bloom like she was making sure it was real. He knelt beside her, promised, "No matter what happens, I'm not going to leave you. You don't have to wonder about that again." She squeezed his hand, fragile but brave, and that's how it was. Not some perfect fairy tale ending, but the beginning of something real. A man who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten how to let anyone in, and a little girl who'd learned too soon not to expect anyone to stay. They had each other now, and in that quiet moment, Edward knew he'd spend the rest of his life proving he was the kind of person she could count on. So, what do you think? Did Edward do the right thing stepping up, or was it reckless to jump into something so huge without a plan? Sometimes the right thing isn't the safe thing. Drop your thoughts below. Where's the line between kindness and responsibility, and who gets to decide? Let's talk about what it really means to show up for someone who needs you most. You ever wake up to a new reality and, just for a second, think you dreamed the whole thing? That's what Edward felt that first morning, sunlight sliding across the floor, the faintest smell of toast in the air, and the surreal quiet of a house that was no longer his alone. There was this strange sense, right at dawn, like maybe he'd imagined the little girl in the yellow raincoat, the weight of that red umbrella, the whole wild turn his life had taken. But as he shuffled into the kitchen, hair a mess, shirt untucked, there was Emma, sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal and a book she'd found on the shelf. She looked up at him, half shy, half defiant, like she was still deciding if she belonged here or not. He fumbled a hello, poured himself coffee, tried to act normal. She watched him the way a stray animal watches a hand reaching out, hopeful but ready to bolt. That first week was a dance of small steps and bigger silences. He'd offer her pancakes. She'd shake her head, then take one when he wasn't looking. She'd wander the hallways, always light on her feet, leaving tiny hints of presence, an open book, a crumpled sock, a question scribbled on a notepad. "Do we have a garden?" Edward tried to work from home, pretending his world hadn't tilted. Emails stacked up, conference calls blurred, but he kept checking the hallway, waiting for Emma to appear or, worse, disappear. Each time she came into the room, quiet but determined, it felt like winning a battle he didn't know he was fighting. He learned fast that trust wasn't a light switch. It was something built with 1,000 tiny gestures, most of them so ordinary you almost missed the weight that carried point. One day, while he was buried in spreadsheets, he heard laughter, thin, rusty, but unmistakable, from the backyard. He peeked out and saw Emma crouched in the garden, hair tangled, hands muddy, watching a butterfly hop from one flower to another. The sight stopped him cold. For the first time, she looked, just for a second, like a kid who'd forgotten to be afraid. He walked out, careful not to startle her. She looked up, wiping her nose with the back of her hand, and blurted, "Can I plant something?" "Like a real flower." He knelt beside her, knees creaking in his tailored pants, and said, "Yeah, of course. We'll plant whatever you want." Her face opened up in a smile that felt like sunrise after a month of rain. A few days later, they went to the nursery together. The saleslady asked if Emma was his daughter. There was an awkward beat. Edward stammered. Emma froze, and the air went tight. He could see her shrinking, shoulders tensing for the usual correction, but he just said, "She's my family." The lady nodded, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and handed Emma a tiny pot of wild violets. On the way home, Emma kept the flower on her lap, fingers tracing the rim as if she was making a promise. They planted it by the rosebush, digging side by side in the cool earth. Edward let her lead, only helping when she asked. When the violet was in the ground, Emma pressed both palms over the soil, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Grow strong, okay? Don't let the rain scare you." Edward's throat went tight. He realized he was learning more about courage from a child than he ever had from a boardroom full of executives. Of course, not every day was easy. Some nights, he'd hear her crying in the dark, muffled under the covers, and it would take everything in him not to rush in and promise the world. Instead, he'd wait by the door, leave the hallway light on, let her know quietly, steadily, that he was there. Sometimes she'd slip into the kitchen at midnight, clutching the little moon lamp from her room, and sit at the table in silence. He'd join her, make hot chocolate, talk about nothing until her breathing slowed and she let her head rest on her arms. They didn't need to name the hurt. It was just part of the air they shared now. Then, one afternoon, everything changed again, a twist nobody saw coming. Edward was fielding calls in the living room when the doorbell rang. He opened it to find a woman in a dark suit, ID badge flashing Child Protective Services. The system had been alerted about a child living with an unmarried man, no prior record, no family connection. She stepped in, her gaze cool but not unkind, asking questions, jotting notes, glancing at Emma with that official concern Edward had always found infuriating in bureaucrats. Emma clung to his side, her eyes wide, panic flickering just under the surface. The woman set them both down. "We have to check that everything is safe for Emma. She'll need to talk with me alone." Edward's gut twisted, but he knelt down, took Emma's hands, and said, "It's okay. I'll be right here. Just tell the truth, kiddo." For the first time, he saw her chin lift with a stubborn kind of pride. "I will," she said. Half an hour later, the social worker came out, her face softer. "She told me about the rain, the umbrella, the garden, about you." She paused, looking Edward dead in the eye. "She trusts you. That matters." She made notes, promised to follow up, and left with a warning. There'd be paperwork, home checks, maybe even a court date. But as the door clicked shut, Emma let out a breath she'd been holding all week. Edward pulled her into a hug, fierce and relieved. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere," he whispered, and this time, she believed it. By the end of that month, the routine they built was imperfect, but theirs. Emma started school, a new place, new faces, a teacher who smiled but pronounced her name wrong. Edward stood at the gate every afternoon, waving, waiting, his heart in his throat until he saw her come running. One day, she handed him a crumpled drawing. It was them, under a red umbrella, smiling in the rain. He almost lost it right there. And on quiet nights, when the city's hum faded and the world felt just a little safer, Edward would sit on the porch with Emma, watching the garden grow, the wild violets blooming beside the old rosebush. He'd think about how it all started, a single act of kindness, a decision he almost didn't make. Funny how life can crack open in the space of a single rainy morning. So now I have to ask you, where do you draw the line between luck and fate, between the family you're born into and the one you choose? If you've ever had to take a leap into the unknown for someone else, did it change you too? Share your stories below. Let's talk about what makes a family, and whether sometimes a storm is the very thing we need to start again.